Microsoft buys Aquantive. Microsoft's purchase of Aquantive is the $6 billion deal almost nobody remembers, which tells you how well it went. In 2007, desperate to compete with Google in online advertising after Google grabbed the ad firm, DoubleClick, Microsoft paid $6.3 billion for the digital ad company Aquantive, its largest acquisition ever at the time, and a price nearly double where the stock had been trading. The two companies never fit together. Key Aquantive leaders walked out the door within 2 years, and Microsoft's advertising business kept losing ground to Google anyway. In 2012, Microsoft quietly took a $6.2 billion write-down on the deal, an accounting admission that essentially the entire purchase price had evaporated. The write-down was large enough to hand Microsoft its first quarterly loss in its 26 years as a public company, a milestone achieved not by a bad product, but by one shopping trip. Terra buys Lycos. Terra buying Lycos is the deal where 99% of the money simply ceased to exist. In May 2000, at the screaming peak of the dot-com bubble, the Spanish internet company Terra Networks agreed to pay $12.5 billion for Lycos, then one of the most visited websites on Earth, a search portal battling Yahoo for the front door of the internet. The deal closed in October 2000, which turned out to be roughly the worst possible month in history to buy a web portal, because the bubble was already deflating and online advertising was about to collapse. Lycos bled users, bled advertisers, and bled relevance year after year as Google quietly ate the entire search market. In 2004, Terra sold Lycos to a Korean company for about $95 million, a 99.2% loss on the purchase price in just 4 years, the kind of number that sounds like a typo and is taught as a warning instead. RBS buys ABN AMRO. RBS winning the fight for ABN AMRO is the corporate version of catching the grenade your rival dropped. In 2007, Royal Bank of Scotland led a consortium that paid around $100 billion for the Dutch bank ABN AMRO, outbidding Barclays in the largest bank takeover ever attempted, and executives celebrated beating their competitor to the prize. The prize was a bomb. The deal closed in October 2007, months before the global financial crisis, and ABN AMRO's books were stuffed with exactly the kind of toxic mortgage assets about to detonate, while the enormous price had drained the capital cushion RBS needed to survive a storm. In 2008, RBS posted a loss of £24 billion, the largest in British corporate history, and had to be rescued with £45 billion of taxpayer money, leaving the British public owning most of a bank older than the United States. The chief executive who chased the deal was later stripped of his knighthood. Bank of America buys Countrywide. Bank of America paid $4 billion for Countrywide and received a $50 billion bill. In January 2008, with the housing market wobbling, Bank of America agreed to buy Countrywide Financial, America's largest mortgage lender, believing it was scooping up a wounded giant at a bargain price. What it actually bought was ground zero of the subprime mortgage crisis, a company whose aggressive loans to borrowers who could not afford them were about to default in catastrophic waves. The bargain price turned into a bottomless pit, as Bank of America spent the following decade absorbing loan losses, government penalties, lawsuits, and settlements tied to Countrywide's lending, with the total damage widely estimated at around $50 billion, more than 12 times the purchase price. Banking analysts routinely rank it the worst acquisition in the history of American finance, a title with serious competition earned by paying $4 billion for the privilege of paying 50 more. Zillow flips houses. Zillow decided its algorithm could flip houses better than humans, and the houses disagreed. Starting in 2018, the real estate site famous for letting people snoop on home prices launched Zillow Offers, using its pricing models to buy homes directly, spruce them up, and resell them at a profit at industrial scale. For a while, the machine bought thousands of homes a month, and in the overheated market of 2021, it sprinted, purchasing roughly 27,000 properties that year alone. Then the market cooled slightly, and the algorithm kept overpaying anyway, leaving Zillow owning a mountain of houses worth less than it paid, with reports showing most of its listings in some cities priced below purchase cost. In November 2021, Zillow killed the entire program, took hundreds of millions in write-downs on the way to roughly $881 million in losses, and cut about a quarter of its staff, roughly 2,000 jobs, all sacrificed to the belief that a spreadsheet understands a kitchen renovation. Verizon buys the old internet. Verizon spent the mid-2010s buying the fading giants of the early web, paying about $4.4 billion for AOL in 2015, and another $4.5 billion for Yahoo in 2017. The plan was to fuse two nostalgic brands into a digital advertising empire that could challenge Google and Facebook, and Verizon confidently named the combined unit Oath, which mostly prompted the entire internet to ask what an oath was. The advertising business never came close to challenging anyone, because Google and Facebook were vacuuming up nearly all the growth in online ads while Oath's share shrank. Verizon wrote down billions within 2 years, renamed the division Verizon Media in a quiet retreat, and in 2021 sold 90% of the whole operation to a private equity firm at a valuation of $5 billion, roughly half what it had paid. The company that once connected America to the internet through screeching dial-up modems had been flipped like a distressed house. AT&T buys DirecTV. AT&T bought DirecTV in 2015 for $48.5 billion, or around $67 billion including debt, acquiring a satellite television empire at the precise moment satellite television began to die. Streaming was already rising, Netflix was already enormous, and the entire logic of paying for hundreds of channels beamed from space was visibly crumbling. But AT&T wanted to be an entertainment giant, and DirecTV made it the biggest pay TV provider in America overnight. Then the subscribers started leaving and never stopped, with the service losing millions of customers year after year as cord-cutting accelerated, no matter how many discounts or streaming spin-offs the company tried. In 2021, AT&T spun off the TV business in a deal valuing it around $16 billion, a collapse of tens of billions in 6 years. Business schools now use the acquisition as a case study in buying the past at the exact moment the future arrives. Kraft Heinz. Kraft Heinz was engineered in 2015 by some of the smartest money on earth, merging two of America's most iconic food companies with backing from the famed investment firm 3G Capital and Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. The playbook was ruthless efficiency, slashing costs to the bone, through a method where every expense had to be justified from zero each year, and for a while the profit margins looked beautiful. But the cuts starved the brands themselves, because while management trimmed, consumer tastes shifted toward fresher and healthier food, and nobody was investing in making Kraft cheese, or Oscar Mayer hot dogs, feel modern. In February 2019, the company shocked investors with a $15.4 billion write-down on its most famous brands, slashed its dividend, and disclosed a regulatory investigation into its accounting, all on the same day. The stock lost more than a quarter of its value overnight, and Buffett himself admitted plainly that they had overpaid. The Herschel Walker trade. The Herschel Walker trade is the deal that built a football dynasty for the team that gave the player away. In October 1989, the Dallas Cowboys were the worst team in football, and new coach Jimmy Johnson traded his one superstar, running back Herschel Walker, to the Minnesota Vikings for a mountain of players and draft picks, a package so large it involved conditions and around a dozen total assets. Minnesota believed Walker was the final piece of a championship roster. He never had a 1,000-yard rushing season there, and the Vikings won nothing. Dallas, meanwhile, converted that mountain of picks into the foundation of a dynasty, using them directly and through further trades to land stars including Emmitt Smith, who became the NFL's all-time leading rusher. The Cowboys won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years in the 1990s, and the deal is now known in sports history, only half-jokingly, as the Great Trade Robbery. Mars passes on E.T. Mars turned down the most famous product placement in movie history, and its biggest rival collected the reward. In 1981, the producers of a Steven Spielberg film about a stranded alien approached Mars about featuring M&Ms as the candy a lonely boy uses to lure the creature out of hiding. Mars said no, for reasons that have been debated ever since. The filmmakers went to Hershey instead, which agreed to promote the movie in exchange for its little-known peanut butter candy, Reese's Pieces, getting the role. The film was E.T., which became the highest-grossing movie of its time and one of the most beloved films ever made, with the candy trail scene as one of its most iconic moments. Sales of Reese's Pieces exploded within weeks of release, jumping by well over half according to the most conservative accounts, with some reports claiming they tripled. Hershey executives later called it the best marketing investment the company ever made, funded entirely by a competitor's no. Groupon rejects Google. Groupon turned down $6 billion from Google when it was 2 years old, and it may be the most expensive no of the social media era. In December 2010, the Daily Deals site was the fastest-growing company anyone had ever seen, and when Google offered around $6 billion, Groupon's young founders walked away, betting they were worth far more. For a moment, they looked right, because the company went public a year later at a valuation near $13 billion. Then the entire Daily Deals model fell apart, as merchants realized the discounts attracted one-time bargain hunters instead of loyal customers, and subscribers grew numb to the endless emails. Revenue stalled, the founder was fired as chief executive in 2013, and the stock entered a decade-long slide. Groupon's market value eventually sank to a small fraction of Google's old offer, at some points less than a tenth of it, turning that 2010 rejection into a permanent monument to catching a falling knife you threw yourself. The Harry Potter rejections. The Harry Potter rejections are publishing's favorite horror story, told from the perspective of the 12 companies that said no. In the mid-1990s, a literary agent shopped a children's manuscript by an unknown single mother named Joanne Rowling to publisher after publisher, and roughly a dozen of them passed on it, with objections reportedly including that it was too long for children. The book finally landed at Bloomsbury, a smaller London house, partly because the chairman's 8-year-old daughter read the first chapter and demanded the rest. Bloomsbury paid an advance of about £2,500 and famously advised Rowling to get a day job, since children's books rarely made money. Harry Potter went on to sell more than 500 million copies, spawn a film and theme park empire worth tens of billions, and become the best-selling book series in human history. Somewhere in London, 12 rejection letters aged into the most expensive paperwork of the century. The Alaska Sale. The Alaska Sale might be the worst real estate decision any country has ever made. In 1867, Russia sold the entire territory of Alaska to the United States for $7.2 million, which works out to about 2 cents per acre, because the Tsar's government feared it could not defend the distant land against Britain and badly needed cash. Remarkably, Americans mocked the purchase at the time, with newspapers calling it Seward's folly after the Secretary of State who signed it, ridiculing the idea of paying millions for a frozen icebox. Then gold was discovered, drawing tens of thousands of prospectors north. Then, in 1968, one of the largest oil fields in North America was found at Prudhoe Bay, which has since produced many billions of barrels. Add fisheries, strategic military position, and an economy now generating tens of billions of dollars every single year, and Russia's quick sale became history's most spectacular case of selling the winning lottery ticket to buy dinner. The Bitcoin pizzas. The Bitcoin pizzas are the most expensive meal in human history, and they were 2 large pizzas from Papa John's. On May 22, 2010, a Florida programmer named Laszlo Hanyecz posted on a Bitcoin forum offering 10,000 Bitcoins to anyone who would order him pizza, back when the digital currency was a hobbyist experiment worth a fraction of a cent per coin. Another user took the deal, spent about $41 on 2 pizzas, and collected the coins, completing what is considered the first real-world purchase ever made with Bitcoin. Those 10,000 Bitcoins went on to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and at Bitcoin's stronger prices, roughly $1 billion, making each slice worth tens of millions in hindsight. The crypto world now celebrates May 22nd as Bitcoin Pizza Day every year. Hanyecz, for his part, has said repeatedly that he has no regrets, since someone had to prove the coins could buy anything at all. The Twitter deal. The Twitter deal is the biggest, most public case of buyer's remorse in modern business. In April 2022, Elon Musk agreed to buy Twitter for $44 billion, then spent months trying to back out of his own offer, completing the purchase in October only after the company sued to force him through. What followed was chaos by any measure, with most staff gone within months, major advertisers pausing spending, and the famous brand discarded when Musk renamed the platform X. The financial verdict came quickly, as Musk himself admitted he was overpaying. The banks funding the deal struggled for years to offload the debt, and major investors marked down their stakes by well over half. In 2025, Musk folded X into his artificial intelligence startup at a valuation of $33 billion, $11 billion below the purchase price, giving the platform a second act in the AI race. Whether that rescue pays off is unknown, but the original deal already earned its place in the dairy aisle.